we basically buy a used company. The first time we did it with other people's money because we didn't have any money. But you buy a used company with other people's money, you put yourself in charge, and you reinvent it. The closest proxy is buying and flipping homes, except you're buying and flipping companies. And you do it one at a time because you put yourself in as senior management. And there's this whole cadre of companies that don't have senior management that's ready to move on. Someone founded a company, their kids either weren't interested in the business or, weren't able to do it.
Cash flow? Cash flow? Did you clear your cash flow?
I have Mike Zani on, Z for short today. You've got pretty crazy background, Mike. You were coach of the year in the '96 Olympics, coaching the sailing team. New York Times best-selling author. The Science of Dream Teams is your book. You've done 4 search funds and exits. You're currently CEO of Predictive Index, which is a market-leading employee assessment platform for hiring and also advancing your team and your talent internally. You grew it from a low 8-figure to a 9-figure revenue business. Also, I heard you're running for president of the United States this year. So where do you want to start with this one?
Oh my God. When you say it, it sounds so cool. I would hide from politics. I'd jump in my boat and never tell anyone where I went if I had to run for president.
I had to throw that last one in there to make sure you're paying attention.
Oh, paying attention. Hopefully it's going to be a more crowded field than it is now. Let's just say that. That's great. Thank you for the very kind introduction, and thank you for making me laugh. I appreciate that.
Sure thing. Yeah. So let's take it to the beginning. I mean, I'd love to just understand how you tick, like the beginning part of your career in this like coaching environment, sailing, very different than building, enterprise businesses and the PE search fund space. So let's just like take it through the whole course, like where you started, how you ended up in the search fund PE space, how you started acquiring companies, and then building. Now you're in tech essentially. So what did that trajectory of your career look like for you?
You reminded me of this. I was 12 years old, and I grew up racing sailboats, and people may know of the Sunfish. It's one of the most famous sailboats ever made, and the little colored triangles, you see them at resorts all around the world. You could rent one or borrow one, and they push on and off the beach. So I was the fleet captain of my Sunfish fleet. I was promoting the class to get people in to race, and it's more fun to race with 10 people than 3. So I would put all the stuff up, and one day the Commodore grabs me by the shoulder, and the Commodore is basically the CEO of the club we were at. They just give him a fancy name. And he says, "Look at your board." And there was the Sunfish board and all the other fleets. He goes, "What do you see?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know." And he's like, "You're the only board that's growing. You're the only board that has all the calendaring and all this stuff." He goes, "You're 12. He says, "I wish all of my fleet captains operated like you." And I was like, "What?" Like I was scared of this human being. And he goes, "You should go into sales." And I was like, I don't even know. So what he identified was I was a promoter, a natural promoter. Even at 12, I didn't know it at the time. I was kind of scared of his commentary. It didn't fit into the perspective, but I went through a very long trajectory until I ran into sailing coaching and really throwing my effort behind that. And my new thing to promote was how to get my athletes to win medals. Like that was the big, hairy, audacious goal. And I really think I've gone from sort of project to project to be like, let's just absolutely slay the dragon at whatever we're doing. And it was very frustrating because after I went to Harvard Business School, I thought this was going to fix my resume. I was like, wow, people thought of me as a sailing coach, which is sort of like closer to lifeguard, than CEO. And And so I go to Harvard Business School. I figured this would fix it all. And I'm applying to get a job at BCG and Bain and McKinsey, and they just couldn't get their arms around. They're like, why do you want to be a management consultant? I mean, like, you were a sailing coach, like you worked for a sailboat manufacturer, like, and I was just sort of like, finally, I would get to the most senior partner and they would ask the same question. I go, every single person on your team, to a person, has asked me, you have a really weird background. Why do you want to be a management consultant? I'm like, listen, I've kicked ass at everything I've done. I want to kick ass for you. Like,
Was
is
that
there a
really the
problem?
answer though? Like, what was
Yeah.
your deepest why on that?
That was, I didn't even get the job. I was like, fuck you guys, you know, and excuse my French, but I was just so frustrated by this, like, you know, inability to convince really smart people that to look outside of this. Okay, yeah, I was a sailing coach. Yes, I was a geochemistry major. You know, yes, I worked for a sailboat manufacturer. Yes, none of that makes sense for me to go work for McKinsey. But, you know, at the same time, you know, like, could you have a little bit different perspective on talent? So I did a search fund. We bought a company and I got to put myself in charge as the CEO. That was an easy way to be like, okay, McKinsey, we can hire you now.
Which
You can
one?
work for me.
Which was that Ledco, or what was your first search fund?
The first one was Ledco, Law Enforcement Development Company. It was a small little manufacturer in suburban Detroit. We made rugged docking stations, typically in cop cars, but cop cars, fire trucks, utility trucks, ambulances, military vehicles, to support rugged computing, to enable a rugged computer to work for all the automated dispatch stuff that those people do.
It's a big industry too. We've worked with companies in the space that do it, like rugged connectors and electronics for like army tanks or you know, like space exploration equipment, you know, rockets, all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty surprisingly big industry, but it's like one of those industries that you just don't ever hear about it in the limelight. You hear about the rocket or you hear about the end result. You don't hear about all the little instruments and, you know, manufacturers and bits and pieces that go into making like the big product.
To this day, one of the most obscure products we ever made is we made the camera mounts at U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. So when you come into the country, you look at a camera, and our mount is holding that camera. So my kids, they have almost no idea what I do because I've done 4 different companies, so it changes all the time. And the only thing they really remember is we come into the country from a trip, and they're like, "My dad made that." You know, and you know, but it is a very obscure yet large marketplace, and I think that's one of the tenets of search funds is you're looking for businesses to buy that aren't sexy necessarily, and they're not front and center. They're not today. They're not AI or crypto. They are the things that are like, I had no idea someone made a rugged docking station for a cop car, but of course someone does.
So there's a lot of like more tech and entrepreneurial listeners on this show. I don't know how many understand finance and PE and search funds. Can you just like do a walkthrough of what a search fund is and how you raised your first search fund?
Well, to all the tech people out there, like the one way to say this in a self-snarky way is, I didn't have a good idea, so instead we bought someone else's idea and explored it being more awesome. Now, but we basically buy a used company. The first time we did it with other people's money because we didn't have any money. But you buy a used company with other people's money, you put yourself in charge, and you reinvent it. The closest proxy is buying and flipping homes, except you're buying and flipping companies. And you do it one at a time because you put yourself in as senior management. And there's this whole cadre of companies that don't have senior management that's ready to move on. Someone founded a company, their kids either weren't interested in the business or, you know, weren't able to do it. They aren't sort of like in a position, like maybe senior management also wasn't good enough for private equity. So there was no fund. It was like, I want to back you, Bob entrepreneur, to do this. And some of these entrepreneurs, they're 65 and they're like, I'm not working for anybody. I'm selling you my company. I'm taking the money. I'm going to give you 30 to 90 days and I'm piecing out. And most private equity firms are like, their eyes get huge and they're like, no, you're going to work for us for 5 years. And they go, I'm not working for anybody. Whereas I would find an owner like that and be like, great, 90 days, you coach me up, show me where the skeletons are in the closet and all where the keys work. And then you can leave and I'll run your company. So this whole world of search fund is doing really well right now because there are a lot of boomers whose kids don't want to go into unsexy businesses. They'd rather, dad, making rugged docking stations is stupid. I want to code, for, Tesla's automated, sensor project, which makes sense. And yet the dad's going, but the rugged docking station business throws off $6 million of cash flow, which paid for you to go to Stanford. It's not a bad business. So you just have to find people who are interested in taking over these companies and exploring what they really can be if you unlock value.
I've been seeing tech people even doing it. There's a lot of people that from tech that have come out of tech and had successful exits and were tired of competing with other tech people because, us tech people are insane in how we compete. So then they'd go into unsexy businesses like storage units or vending machines or like other industries that are just not highly competitive. You can just kind of get in and just execute, do your thing and just, build a solid business out of it.
And there are so many incredibly solid businesses. We looked at 400 companies to buy for. So, 100-to-1 ratio, simple math. You look at 100 businesses. We looked at sausage processing, beef jerky, aftermarket cabling and cable harnesses for scanning machines that spin like a PET scan or a CAT scan. And you're like, oh, that's pretty diverse. And the fun part is people, they're like, are you afraid of going into a new industry? And you're like, not anymore. It takes 6 months before you even have a sense of what the industry is. And some industries are harder than others. Actually, healthcare was one of the hardest to get into. We bought a company and grew a company called Shape Up, which did health and wellness. And there's just so much, it's such a huge industry and there's so much jargon and there's so much domain experience. It was really a struggle to understand that industry. We did it and had a great exit, but at the end I was still like, after 5 years, is like, I think I'm just scratching the surface.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode. Is Predictive Index the biggest top-line company you've built or acquired and scaled so far, or one of the other ones bigger in the past?
This is the biggest. So the we is my business partner and I, and our collection of 10 high net worth individuals. Now it's 17. But to follow up, like the individuals who backed us on the first company when we didn't have money, they backed us to find a company. They helped us invest. They put equity in. We earned sweat equity. We sold it, returned capital. They said, do that again. But we've done it 4 times. And the Predictive Index, which we bought in 2014, it was doing 16.5 million in revenue. We're doing over 100 million now. And so it's the biggest. I would say it's the best fundamental bones of a company. It's the industry that we have the most affinity for. It's the talent space. Flashback to my rant about McKinsey and being like, look at talent in a different way. But it has the most revenue, and I actually think it has the largest total addressable market.
I think so. Yeah, I would say
every organization with people. It could be a mega church. It could be a sports franchise. It can be Subway, auto dealership, mining company, high tech. It doesn't matter.
You're already, I'm not going to name your competitors, but you're like side by side with like maybe two other companies that are at the top of the category, and it's like you and like your other, let's say it's like two competitors own the category. So it's like
Name them. Name the competitors. I'm not afraid of them. They're afraid of me.
Yeah, I mean, you've got like Disc, obviously. There's Predictive Index. You've got Disc. There's Myers-Briggs is another big one. A lot of companies use. And then there's a few smaller ones. I've used Best Work Data before, but it's
and there's Wonderlic, Gartner. There's there's People Answers. It's everywhere.
I think you guys are like really tech forward though, which I love. Some of these other surveys, like these other assessments, you take them and it's like it feels like you're on 15-year-old tech. And the questionnaires are long. It can take 20, 30 minutes to complete the questionnaire. And sure, a lot of them give out good insights, but Predictive Index, I just took it in preparation for meeting with you today. And we were just, in the before we started the episode, we were talking about my results, and it took like 5 minutes, not even. It was like two or 3 minutes to fill out the questionnaire. You get back your immediate results, and it's just amazingly accurate. I read the 2-page summary it gave me, and just word for word, everything was right on point. So I love like that's putting user experience first. I mean, that's like a tech principle to put the user experience first and build a really great product that has a great experience around it.
No, I appreciate your very, generous and kind words. The founder of our company came up with that science methodology 68 years ago. So like that beautiful questionnaire to get that assessment, I can't take credit for, and there is amazing bang for the buck, but we have invested heavily in the software to support it. This assessment, believe it or not, same format, was done in pencil and paper and was hand scored originally. And you didn't get a report, you just got the pattern that you saw, which the users can't see at the moment. But you have to build software that says, oh, let's do a machine generated report or reports. We do machine generated fit analysis. So if you were my new boss and I was starting work on Thursday tomorrow, you're sitting here going, what's gonna be like to work with Mike? And I'm gonna be like, what's it gonna be like to work with you? And so you build a lot of tools around the algorithms that the original founder created.
If you want to share your screen and show my report and kind of talk through it, feel free. Up to you if you want to do that or not. But
oh yeah,
what I found was like the visuals didn't make, like, to you they make a lot of sense because you stare at them all day. The visuals don't make as much sense to me. I think you have to understand it more. But the paragraphs that came below it that like describe in words about me, that was like spot on. It made so much sense to me.
Well, here you have a flash, and I'll do a little more explaining. And I apologize, all the tabs. At least they're somewhat organized. I'll close my board tab. You are a maverick, so we give you this sort of like one of 17 reference profiles. That's kind of like the neighborhood you live in. But what you're looking at here, I'm going to compress it. This pattern is your behavioral drives. This is Brian, and you have this little carrot in the center. That if you surveyed 1,000 people and averaged them, you would have a straight line on the zero, which would be everyone regresses to the mean. That is the average population. Each of these, you can see these lines are standard deviations. So this is a standardized bell curve. There we measure 4 core behavioral drives. A is dominance. You are over 3 sigma high dominance, which means you like to put your thumbprint on things and put your ideas into practice. You are 2 sigma high extroversion, so social, natural communicator. You're over 2 sigma low impatience, so you're impatient. You like to juggle. You respond well to pressure. You actually apply pressure to yourself and others to get stuff done as a natural course. and you are almost 3 sigma low in formality. So rules are sort of suggestions, structure is whatever. And this thing in entirety makes you sort of this maverick, big picture, strategic, very risk tolerant, very entrepreneurial pattern. It can be a little loose, like, and by loose, you're like, what does that mean? And your parents might have been like, wow, it's hard to sort of control Brian, and you're like, maybe that's a little bit true, and it was just because you have your own North Star and drive really hard to follow that North Star. And this is most patterns fall within plus or minus 1 sigma. You are plus or minus 3. So when your mom said you were special, she meant it. You are special on almost all 4 dimensions, meaning special, meaning there's very few people who have this wide of a pattern. And
I'll share this episode with her. Shout out to my mom, Debbie Denis, for putting up with me and raising me for 20 years and sticking through it. I know I was a hard son to raise.
I'll tell you, so the Maverick pattern is it can be challenging to manage, but as long as you know what Brian's North Star is, and everything gets tied back to your North Star, it actually you can manage really well. And it doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily control Brian. Like, I hire Mavericks all the time, but I'm certainly not going to hire you to run my accounting department. Like, you would hate that job. And after 3 weeks, you'd say, can I have a new job? Like, there's just too much attention to detail and too much process and too much of same. However, if you could run my accounting department and raise money for me, and you could be like, all right, let me do finance and raise money. So it's really just about finding fit with what would Brian love to continue to do in this world. So I'll stop sharing there, but thank you for letting me do that. And I appreciate the opportunity to do a little behavioral science.
Yeah, cool. I love it. And we were talking, so you have, let's kind of like change lanes here. So you have a book, The Science of Dream Teams, New York Times bestseller. We were talking about chapter 2 the other day, the front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt model, which was really interesting to me because I've never used that terminology, but I talk about this a lot with people that, that your greatest asset can also be your biggest liability, in the sense that, you have the positive side and the shadow side of every trait. It's not like one trait is just not all bad or all good, but there's like a string that reaches both sides of the equation. And you had like a really interesting like way of describing that and a framework for how to think about it. Do you want to talk about that in your book a little bit?
I'd love to, but first, a shameless plug. No,
we'll put that in the show notes, by the way. Is there do you want us to link to your website or the Amazon link or something, or where's the best place?
Dreamteams.io is the website for the book. There's a sample chapter. You can take an assessment there if you'd like to. So front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt. This is this concept that is really powerful for people who want to go on a self-awareness journey. And self-awareness is not the only predictor of great manager and leadership qualities, but it is a powerful predictor of great leadership qualities, and also on growth mindset and people who are lifelong learners. So whether you're in business or not, whether you're an individual contributor or managing a ton of people, like, consider going on this self-awareness journey. So this actually, he was a Bain partner. So while I threw all the consultants under the bus at the beginning of this episode, they do add a lot of value to the world. Jim Allen, he's a partner at Bain UK, and he came up with this concept of front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt. And he said, what's interesting is when you are a manager about to be a partner at Bain, your front of t-shirt, all the things that you're good at, all the things that you've been told your whole life you're amazing at. Like, by the time you're a 5th-year manager at Bain, about to be partner, that front of t-shirt is awesome. It is like smart, driven, business acumen. It just goes on and on. He says, but however, it's what's on the back of t-shirt which keeps you from becoming partner. Are there things on the back of your t-shirt that are so loud? They manifest so often or so frequently or at the wrong times that they take you out from being all the stuff on the front of your t-shirt. And this, as soon as I heard this model, I was like, holy smokes, I got to figure out what's on the front of my t-shirt and the back of my t-shirt. And what's on the front of your t-shirt, again, your mom would brag to her friends about all of this stuff. Now, and some of it's defined by your behavioral profile, like driven, natural juggler, risk tolerant, big ideas, goal oriented, all that stuff. You've heard this. But the back of t-shirt stuff, other people know. And that's why I love this. You're like, hey, Brian, what does it say back there? So you have to go on this journey to say, like, what's back there? When does it manifest? What are my triggers? Because you're never going to get rid of this stuff. If you tried to, you'd have to get rid of the front too, because like you said, they're tied. What's on the back, and can I recognize those triggers so I can stop them before they start? That you're like, I'm about to do it again. Like you and I were talking before the show about your pattern suggests, and you copped to it and said, I can run people over. So you really try and pull yourself in certain situations so you don't run people over all the time, because you said it happens easily, and you're not doing it out of malice. You're just doing it because you're a maverick, and mavericks kind of like to do that. So you've already gone on this journey a little bit, saying, how do I pull myself in? Because running people over intentionally or unintentionally is not always well received. So you go, in certain situations you get away with it a lot. Some certain situations get away with a little. Certain situations you get away with it none. So you're like, if I want to be successful, I pull this in. And what I would say to your audience is, go on this journey. Like, quite literally, figure out what's in the front, celebrate it, try and play the game of life on the front.
Front's more
Figure out
obvious
what's
though. The front's more obvious what's on there.
Yeah, but you've got to celebrate it, and you've got to make sure you play the game there. Figure out what's on the back, and make sure that stuff doesn't. Figure out the triggers, when it manifests. So I don't always listen. And when I started going on this journey of front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt in 2006, that's about all I had. I mean, and then I said, I need to know more about I don't listen. So now today, I don't listen for 4 reasons. One is, bright shine, like squirrel, like you said something, it made me think about something else. And all of a sudden I was like, sorry, Brian, I was not focusing. Now that's not going to happen on the podcast because you and I are arcing. The second thing is, I've already made up my mind, and I'm not listening to you because you disagree with that. The third, and this one's really bad, is I don't respect you on this topic. That is, I hate that about me, but it's there. And the fourth thing is, sometimes I am thinking about my response. So I listened to you for the first half of your comment, pivoted to my response, and wasn't listening to the back half of the concept of your comment. And that could have been the important part. You could have been just preamble setting up. You pivoted, and I missed it. So I've given.
Are you a
my
maverick
team,
too?
I'm not. I'm almost as wide as you. I'm a persuader, which is like a cousin.
I have every
of a
single one
maverick.
of those back of t-shirts that you just said.
Yeah, I understand it, but the thing is, this: I've given my my employees and those close to me a safety word. So when I don't listen, they can call me on it. The word is Ticonderoga, and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, you're not going to accidentally say that." So
Yeah.
when they go Ticonderoga, and I've even had people give me Ticonderoga pencils. They're like, yeah, you do it a lot. So, and when they do that, I go, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to not be listening to you. And I look back into, like, which version of not listening is it? And the only one that is in a very graceful landing is when I don't respect you on the topic. But like, if it's like someone says, Mike, it seems like you've already made up your mind. Can you just give me 5 minutes to give you my best pitch on why I think differently? And I'm like, yeah, Brian, I respect you. Yeah, I'll do that. So it's it's something that you can even recruit people to help you with.
So what about though? All right, so the don't respect somebody on the topic thing makes sense, and that definitely is a shadow trait. But like maybe there's a positive to that too. Maybe if you have a vendor or somebody, a partner, an employee, somebody who's just clearly not the right person to be making that decision, and you don't respect them on that topic, but they do have some sort of like form of power or authority just based on like hierarchy in the environment you're working in. Is there a right time when you should just make the decision and kind of make the call and plow forward with it, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a big question about. I view it as never being a positive. I think people deserve the respect of being listened to, no matter who or what they are. You may not like them. You may not have anything to learn or gain from them, but as a human being, they deserve that. And so I don't like it about myself. It's one of those things. You're like, that's an ugly piece of Mike Zani that I try to not let out. And there are times when I'm hearing someone, I'm like, I don't really give a bleep what you have to say about this topic. And then you shouldn't just dismiss them. Give them, you're like, hey, yeah, I don't quite agree with you, or I see it differently, and you try and move on. I got in a fight with my neighbor across the street about politics, and finally I had nothing nice to say, and I was like, hey, we should probably change topics. And they're like, why? We're having a good conversation. I'm like, I don't have anything nice to say to you on this topic, and you're my neighbor. I don't really want to be disrespectful, and that was the best I could do. And my wife said, "You said that?" I was like, "That was the best I could do at the moment." And she goes, "That's horrible." And I was like, well, "It was better than what I was gonna say." And
Yeah.
like I, so I'm not proud of it, but I actually think every person, if you really do this exploration, you'll find stuff on the back of your T-shirt that you also are not proud of, and that means you're doing a good job of finding it.
I've been
It's
personally
real.
going on that part of like a personal exploration for, I would say, I'm 35 years old now. I've been doing it for probably 7 or 8 years now, and I think I still have more things to uncover on there. Like I know most of the top level categories, but like you said, there's more deep diving into those subcategories to figure out what is, like maybe there's multiple reasons why I have a certain behavior. I know a lot of what my shadow behaviors are, but like the why they happen, I have more exploration on a lot of mine.
Yeah, I think most people do, and it's this lifelong journey. Like there's this great business mind, Michael Olaso, and he doesn't come from a business world. He comes from he was a former actor and director, and you're like, what? You're like, I didn't expect to hear that, and you're like, yeah, he's first of all, if you act and direct at a super high level, most of the people in that game are super talented, like crazy talented. They can sing, they can dance, they can change themselves to be anyone they want to be. It's crazy. Um, and he really is talking about how do you be you on your best day. And he thinks of all these behaviors, and he coaches people on how they're perceived. And the idea, like, you've got this self-defeating behavior. It's like, you just gotta, because you can't get rid of it. You just gotta make sure it doesn't, you know, take you out. And I think if everyone just had that mantra, you're like, I just want to be me on my best day, most days. And you'd be like, yeah, me too. Um, and you want to enable those who work around you to be them on their best days. So,
Absolutely.
and if you do that, you're going to get a lot of value from your days, your work, your life, your relationships, and you're going to be a happier person.
Yeah, so it's like in my business, Curotech, we're a software services company, and my business partner and I, she's like the exact opposite of me. She's very much like the integrator. I'm very much the visionary, if we're using like EOS terminology. And so like sometimes it works really well together. Sometimes we just butt heads and then at the worst, sometimes we like trigger the hell out of each other. And so it's like, it's got like really good positives and really good and really big negatives that come out of being that different sometimes. But like you said, like learning how to work with people in a way that being aware of like your shadow traits and how how the front of t-shirt is a positive, and understanding your back of t-shirt for those interactions, like that's I think that's a lifelong journey. There's never a destination on that. There's always work that you can do. And I've heard guys in their 60s and 70s talking about how they're still living that journey of their their shadow side and how to be the best version of themselves in this world. So it's a never ending journey. I think lifelong journey.
Yeah, I think that when you find people who've been on this planet longer than you, who are still on that journey, it can be inspirational. You're like, well, you've learned a lot, and you're still willing to learn, and you find those lifelong learners, who are still curious and willing to change at whatever their age, and it makes you feel good about humanity. It's pretty cool, and you've probably seen tech forward 80-year-olds. They might not be great at it, but they're trying, and you're like, good on you. You're like, you got a TikTok account, right on.
I've met a few really sharp technologists that would be outside of the age demographic typical in a tech forward person. But hey, I'm curious. So on your book, The Science of Dream Teams, what is the business of being an author like? Is that a good business to be in? Is it more of like a marketing tool for the PI business, or what is it? What's the business of being an author like?
I'm not an expert in the business of being an author. I really feel that if you've got something to say it. You're saying it through a podcast, video cast, and all the ways that you promote this. And I think that's great to share thought leadership. I actually started similarly. I was running a video cast called Dream Teams, and there was enough cool content, and I had enough access to data through the predictive index, and I was in the talent space long enough that I was like, I've got something to say on this. That has the book paid for itself? It actually has, but that's really not the reason to do it. It's first and foremost, you have something to say. I do think a lot of people in my position as a leader of a company who's trying to establish thought leadership, you do it for marketing for the company, you do it for market for yourself to ideally get better speaking gigs. And I think if that's the only reason you're doing it, it probably doesn't turn out to be that great of a book. I think if you've got something to say, someone might enjoy it. I think if your book catches fire, the business of being an author can be remarkably cool. You get to meet and speak with interesting people like yourself, have great conversations. Sometimes people build off of your thought leadership and make it better than you ever could. I mentioned Jim Allen, the partner at Bain. I talked to him about writing front of t-shirt, back of t-shirt, writing either a booklet, a mini book, maybe it's just a business paper, Harvard Business Review article on it. And he's like, I don't know, man. He goes, you seem like you're farther ahead on this concept than me. I'm like, but you're the progenitor. And he's just like, yeah, run with it if you want. Like everyone's got their own stuff. I do think those people who are truly brilliant thinkers, the Jim Collinses of the world, who made us think differently, the Malcolm Gladwells, where they write book after book after book, and they're all really good. That's special. It's special to find thinkers like that. And actually, you meet Jim Collins in real life, and you see him speak, and he he doesn't like speaking and he sweats profusely when he speaks, and he's kind of, you can tell he's uncomfortable. He does it because he wants to get his message out there, but he is certainly not doing it to speak more. He wishes he could speak less. But at the same time, he's got so much to say.
So interesting. Yeah, that's such an interesting, real thing that happens. I've heard the same thing about musicians where, they're up there just like sharing the stage, they're up on stage, sharing the night with, thousands of people almost every night over and over. But they have to go through like a 2-hour nervous breakdown, like every night before they go up on stage to go and do that performance. And it's so, it's like a catch-22 to be in that situation as a performer or as somebody like Jim Collins with that sort of a following.
And they're giving their gift to you in some respects, that way, that they really don't want to be doing it, but they somehow muster the energy to go do it. It is, so they're giving that gift to the world, I guess. I wouldn't certainly put my writing or thought leadership in the camp of that, but it was actually a very enjoyable year where I got to spend, and I was scared of writing a book. I was a science major, good at math. My English teacher from high school was probably like, you wrote a what? No way. Impossible. Like, so it was scary to write a book, but it turns out to be really enjoyable when you get to spend time really pushing forward your thought leadership. And I try to keep the cadence of writing a chapter a month. So just keep clapping on.
So changing gears, I'm going to move in. I want to move back to PI and close on a couple specific things there. We have a mutual client, MEA, Mid-Atlantic Employers Association. They're like an HR community for HR professionals to get access to information, documents. They have a big partnership with PI for administering the PI assessment to employees. Shout out to Kevin Robbins, the CEO. One thing I found, like in their community, the HR professionals are like big mega fans of Predictive Index. It's like it's a really, like, the brands in those HR communities, the PI brand is like it's almost like an Apple product kind of brand where there's like super loyal fans. Is that something that has always been with the legacy of the company, or is that something like, how did you guys create that like loyal fan base of users?
Let me also give a shout out to Holly DePalma, who works for Kevin, who is, Kevin's an amazing business mind, but Holly's really his dynamo who makes the PI engine tick with internally. They do a great job. So I look at this, when someone gives you the gift of a tool that changes the way you think. And, someone in 2006, I was introduced to the Predictive Index and I was like, holy crap, that was really powerful. Imagine the implications if I knew this about all my people. So I went on that journey and I had a guide like Holly who helped teach it to me. It happened to be my certified partner at the time. And, I'm still friendly with my first guide. And I think when something changes your perspective, you have affinity for it. I mean, some of our customers will get frustrated. They go, there's a bug in the software, or I don't like the change you made to the user interface. But they're still like, I like the core underlying science. So I think we have a tremendous amount of very passionate users who would bring us from company to company to company. And a lot of it has to do with, we have great science. Yeah, our assessment's pretty fast and slick and gives you a lot of feedback. Yeah, our software is great. But that's not it. You also have to have a guide that makes you go, aha, I see how I can use this to make my life better in business or managing up, down, across, building teams, hiring. And when you do, creating cultures, when you do, then you're like, I'm never going to let this go. It's kind of like, maybe a person goes, likes to work out and they hurt themselves working out. And then someone taught them like, hey, here's how you stretch and here's how you warm up and here's better technique and form and you won't hurt yourself anymore. Here's how you cool down. And all of a sudden you're like, thank you for this gift. Like I wanted to do something. I just wasn't doing it right. And I really feel that our certified partners are huge guides in making that happen.
That's awesome. Then the last question for you here, and then feel free to plug anything else if you want at the end. A product like PI, I have to ask, like, how do you guys plan to incorporate machine learning and AI? That's such a big topic these days. How do you plan to incorporate that into the product? Some of it might be proprietary, I'm sure. So share what you can share. But I'm curious, like, where does a tool like PI go with some of these advancements in LLMs and ML that are really coming available for commercial use?
I'm gonna answer this question that some people who are thinking about AI today, and we got to give a date. So it's May 2023. In May 2023, we don't know whether AI is going to be the next internet or the next mobile smartphone, meaning a really big thing that changes the world. Or is it going to be Google Glass and the Metaverse, which is like, nothing burger. I'm going to answer the question as if it's going to change the world because I personally believe it is. But there are going to be huge winners and losers as a result of this world change, just like there was in mobile and just like there was when the internet came. And the people who are going to win are those who understand how their customers use their stuff and those who are able to use their data effectively with the new tools. AI is going to do 90% of the work for us. We have proprietary algorithms on our science. We have proprietary matching between a maverick and a job. Like I said, you would not make a very good controller, and you're like, no, duh. And I was like, yeah, but we can predict that positively and negatively. So if we apply those algorithms and our data, machine learning just unlocks all that stuff. So, a fun example would be how many people on Curtech? How many people?
Around 80, roughly.
80. And how many direct reports do you have?
Technically 0, but kind of like 4 or 5, I'd say.
So you and your partners, your senior team is 4, 5, 7.
Yeah, pretty much everyone reports up to my partner, who's COO. So I'm kind of
okay. So let's take her team. So she's got 7 direct reports, say.
Yeah, about that.
So like she's got 7 direct reports. Let's say she was going to hire an 8th, and the machine learning would be like, okay, so the 8th person takes a behavioral and cognitive assessment, and we're going to have the machine learning do all of the work that she's going to say, well, let's just call Bob. So it's like, what's Bob going to be like on the team? And you could say, well, Bob is going to be either, is he going to make the team more homogeneous or more heterogeneous? Is that team a good fit for the work that needs to be done? What are the joys and frustrations of Bob behaviorally, cognitively on that team? And who's Bob going to most likely have conflict with on that team and why? All of that stuff can be done through AI. It's just algorithms. It's like we understand, these, person A and then team that's filled with 7 people. We understand those dynamics and we just surface them. It doesn't mean that every suggestion is right. Let's just say we give 8 suggestions to your partner and only 6 of them are right. We're going to let your partner interpret that and go, you're right.
That's brilliant, man. I love, it's like playing out the dynamics that will develop on a team. Kind of like, I was trying to think of a metaphor for that. And it's like when you take particle accelerators and collide atoms or, break apart atoms to see how the different particles interact with each other in those situations. it's like recreating how teams will interact. Like when you add or remove variables, how does that change the way the team works? It's so brilliant.
And you can do it in reverse. You could be having a reduction in force. You might be considering moving someone off team. You might be creating, spinning up a new team. And obviously with senior teams, you can actually take the culture of the senior team is going to be highly predictive of the culture of the whole company, or division, depending on, what frame you put on it. But it's like, if you can predict, you're like, here's the new team I'm going to create. They're going to lead this new division department. What culture are they going to create? How does that culture then fit in? All of that is more or less predictable. And the machines are better at doing that repetitively in mass, instead of, like, we're doing this experiment right now where we have a bunch of PhDs in IO psychology on staff. These people are professional psychometricians. They can look at data and analyze what's going on. They can look at Curatex engagement data and come up with, here's what's going right, here's what's going wrong, here are your hotspots. These 5 managers have, issues. It's work. It takes them hours of looking at the data. We're trying to make sure that, we've bought a proprietary seat of GPT-4, and we're training it so that the machine can do it. Why do I need a PhD in IO Psych to do this analysis? It's looking at numbers, and it's looking at open field text responses. And you're like, it's really good at doing those 2 things. Why shouldn't the machine be as good as a PhD in IO psychology, or close enough that what you do is you do give it the answer and then just have an IO Psych review it and go, yeah, that's good. That's what I would have come up with.
100%. I don't think it's a nothing burger for all the reasons you just said. We've already implemented, my firm Curatex has already implemented, various LLMs. We've done some GPT 3.5 and 4 through the OpenAI API, and a couple like customized LLMs for various clients. And it's already taking tasks or like data crunching that previously took a lot of manual effort or was inaccurate, and being able to like do data classifications faster, reduce the amount of disparity you might have across various humans doing repetitive tasks, and also forcing companies to think and codify their own methodologies for how they classify data. Whereas before it might have just been judgment calls based on whatever that person's emotional state or whatever various person might have done that task on any given day. Now it's like codified into a formula, and you can benchmark what the AI says against what the average of the people would say on each individual case, to create sort of like a mapping of effectiveness. But like we're already doing that with clients now, and it's amazing. Like it's not a nothing burger for those reasons, because it's already working. It's already helping companies do more with their data and do it for less cost and less human capital.
Yeah, so the winners will engage someone like you, but the winners are, you've got to know how their clients are using, and I'll just stop at using it. They use whatever it is they use. Do they have the data and the algorithms? And if they do, there's a chance they could be the winner. If they don't, they're going to be the loser. And, it might not change the pest control company that's down the street from your home, but it's going to change a lot of industries pretty meaningfully.
I agree. Z, this was an awesome episode. Really excited about this one. Anything you want to close on or plug before we hop off today?
No, Brian, I wanted to say you're really enjoyable to speak with. Keep doing what you're doing. You have a gift for it. You obviously enjoy it. So, thank you for taking some of your time and doing the prep work to ask great questions. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Cash flow flow?